Attention, the masterstroke that could tilt the war in favor of Kyiv. And stay tuned if you believe that, instead, this race against time could trigger an even more dangerous escalation. We will see how the United States is redefining the rules of the game with its logistical deployment against Russia. Could this lead to a world war? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss future reports. Before dawn, on the frozen roads of Eastern Europe, dozens of heavy military trucks appeared out of nowhere on key routes. There were no flags or official announcements, but Russian surveillance systems detected something unusual, a movement at unprecedented speed. From Poland to the Ukrainian border, hundreds of vehicles advanced in tight formations. They were not transporting troops or artillery pieces. Their cargo was even more lethal. Speed. Moscow understood it instantly. The logistics reports from Donetsk were re-encrypted, and the commands in Zaporizhzhia received urgent instructions to reinforce defenses. But it wasn't firepower that puzzled them. It was the ability to move. The adversary could be organizing a mobile counterattack capable of striking before they could react. Was this move just a technical adjustment in the supply chains, or the signal of something greater, where speed would determine the course of battle? The United States has deployed more than 100 next-generation heavy transporters in Ukraine. The EETS systems, EETS, combinations of the M13000 tractor and the M1 semi-trailer, designed to move M1 Abrams tanks across difficult terrain at high speed. But this goes beyond a tactical upgrade. At a time when doubts are growing about Western commitment, especially among lawmakers questioning the cost of aid, the Biden administration sends a clear message. We will not retreat. We will strengthen our support. Not with words, but with visible, high-impact action. Not a mere logistical operation, but a rolling political show. Vehicles nearly 25 meters long, proving that Washington continues to uphold NATO. For nervous allies and defiant rivals, the EETS symbolize determination. Moreover, this deployment shifts the focus from the number of troops or weapons to mobility. By accelerating tank transfers to the front, the U.S. allows Ukraine to maintain momentum without provoking open war. It's a smart way to pressure Russia while avoiding direct confrontation. Yet the real power of this initiative lies in what the EETS will unlock in Ukrainian tactics. Technicians and crews have already been trained to operate and maintain them. It's not just about sending equipment, but integrating it into real combat operations. By freeing themselves from dependence on railways, Ukraine can rapidly redeploy forces, reinforce gaps, or reposition along the front without alerting the enemy. A nightmare for Russian commanders accustomed to slow, linear warfare. At first glance, they look like just more support trucks. But for military planners, they represent a paradigm shift. Ukraine will not only defend itself, it will be able to advance with unprecedented speed. Is a decisive counteroffensive looming? Is Russia already bracing for the blow? The EETS have just arrived, but their deployment is rewriting the rules of modern war. With more than 100 of these transporters, Washington sends a message louder than any diplomatic speech. The U.S. is investing in Ukraine's long-term combat capability. These systems can move Abrams tanks and Bradley vehicles across hostile terrain without relying on trains. Before, Ukrainians had to use railways to transport armor, a slow method, vulnerable to Russian drone strikes. The EETS changed that equation. When war is measured in hours, not days, whoever moves first usually wins. With these transporters, Ukraine enters that game. And it's not only about moving tanks, it's about redefining reaction and counterattack. Armored units can now position themselves in hours, not days. Picture a quiet front line, Russian troops confident, unaware that dozens of Abrams are silently approaching under the cover of night. They arrive before drones can record the movement. Without railways or vulnerable convoys, Ukraine maintains a decisive logistical edge. Each EETS opens new routes, tactics, and opportunities. A deck of options that forces the enemy to stay reactive, never proactive. And it's not just machinery, it's a morale boost. Ukrainian soldiers, under extreme conditions, now have reliable support. No more waiting, no more uncertainty about when reinforcements will arrive. For Russia, a nightmare scenario. Their lines can be breached in unimaginable ways, and destroying railway lines ceases to be an effective strategy. Each EETS combination is designed for combat, powerful engines, adaptive suspensions, and high-load trailers that cross rivers, climb slopes, and navigate debris. They are so reliable that they turn Ukraine's supply chain into a robust network, capable of moving faster than Russia can respond. This quiet logistical shift doesn't make headlines like a missile strike, but it should, because modern war is not fought only with bombs, but with positioning, timing, and speed. With the EETS, Ukraine gains all three. Every transporter delivered is a step toward dominating time and space on the battlefield. Strategically, the U.S. is not only sending weapons, but building capability. More than trucks, the EETS embody a new doctrine: strike fast, move with agility, and keep the initiative. Now, the key question is how Russia will react. Will it bomb roads instead of railways, increase drone surveillance of these convoys, or is it already too late to stop this advance? When the first 100 EETS units crossed the border, alarms rang in the Kremlin. It wasn't just a transfer of equipment, but a strategic turn. Within days, reinforcements arrived in Donbass and Zaporizhzhia, and satellite images showed new trenches, fortifications, and mobilization of reserves. Russian militias began monitoring Ukrainian convoys relentlessly, aware that these transports eliminated the need for railway routes. This tactical dynamism forced Russia to rethink defenses: mines on roads, bridges reinforced or rigged for demolition, and anti-tank weapons closer to the front. Yet despite it all, there is something they cannot neutralize: the uncertainty generated by Ukrainian mobility. What was once a static front becomes a chessboard where Kyiv moves the fastest pieces. With frequent patrols and tests in Zaporizhzhia, many experts agree that a decisive counteroffensive could begin within weeks. Russian propaganda, once boastful, now warns of foreign provocations. The message is clear: prepare the public for defeats. Senior commanders are nervously discussing the possibility that their lines could collapse under a lightning assault. But this goes beyond tactics. A victory under these conditions would have tremendous symbolic impact, challenging Russia's ability to control the pace of war. Behind this new speed is logistical autonomy, controlling the flow of weapons in ways Russia cannot match. How does this affect the supply chain? Could it bring Ukraine closer to victory? Kyiv's biggest problem has been depending on trains to move weapons and fuel, easy targets for Russian missiles and drones. Each disruption caused days of delay. That's why the EETS are crucial. They can transport Abrams and Bradleys without using a single inch of rail. Their strength lies in speed and flexibility, alternative routes, detours through secondary roads, and no need to announce itineraries. Ukrainian generals now choose where to deploy tanks and when to surprise the enemy, without depending on railways. Neither weather nor terrain is an obstacle. When roads flood or snow falls, the EETS find secondary routes and keep the supply chain active. With them, Kyiv controls the pace, location, and timing of its deployments, turning logistics into strategy with total independence from political delays. But a large vehicle is useless without trained operators. The United States trained drivers, mechanics, and planners so Ukraine could manage the EETS on its own. They went through intense training in Germany, led by U.S. instructors, loading dozens of tanks, crossing difficult terrain, and making repairs under simulated combat conditions. Thus, they no longer depend on foreign advisors. Ukrainian crews move and maintain their own fleet autonomously. The next step was integrating everything into the supply network: NATO allies' tactical software, mobile fuel stations, on-field repair teams, and encrypted communications. Each EETS convoy became a self-sufficient system, capable of reacting to ambushes, detours, or breakdowns without stopping. The strategic impact is clear. Ukraine can launch surprise counterattacks, reinforce vulnerable sectors, and retreat without leaving equipment behind. That mobility keeps Russia off balance, with no room to plan. Now Kyiv no longer depends solely on NATO. It has designed and launched its own logistical network, able to respond instantly to frontline demands instead of being tied to bureaucratic delays or political debates in other parliaments. Thanks to mobile control centers, forward warehouses, and alternative routes mapped by tactical planning software, armored columns can receive reinforcements and supplies in hours, not days. This modular system self-adjusts to terrain conditions and enemy threats. If a main road is blocked, algorithms reroute convoys through secondary roads without stopping the flow of support. With this, Ukraine has gained autonomy and speed, ensuring that each reinforcement arrives exactly where it's needed. Moscow watches with concern. Fixed defenses are useless against an adversary that can appear anywhere at any time. Still, speed alone is not enough. Ukraine's next challenge will be turning these rapid movements into concrete successes. The advantage is undeniable. Shifting tank arrivals from days to hours makes all the difference. This speed enables hit-and-move tactics, strike, change position, and force the enemy to react without time to regroup. It also multiplies attack axes. Deploying armor simultaneously on multiple fronts disorients Russian forces. From Donetsk to Zaporizhzhia, the EETS can move heavy units from one end to the other in a single day, putting the Kremlin on edge. Each movement is also a deception maneuver. While Russia protects railway lines, Ukraine advances along secondary roads. The war ceases to be an artillery duel and becomes a race against time. And in that race, whoever arrives first decides the outcome. The EETS don't just move tanks, they pressure Russian supply lines, disrupt artillery schedules, and avoid detection before striking. With them, Ukraine can hit first and hard, exploiting disruption in the enemy's chain of command. Ultimately, the arrival of the EETS is not just new equipment, but proof that the United States leads the defense of Eastern Europe. It's a tangible demonstration of ongoing support and an invitation for allies to do the same. With this initiative, Washington sets the pace. It's not enough to send weapons, it's about designing the logistical and strategic doctrine that will define the next stage of the conflict. The deployment of the EETS forces NATO to reconsider its own supply chains and invest in similar mobile systems. For Moscow, every transporter delivered is a reminder that the alliance evolves and that the United States sets the tone. While some question financial support, the facts show that in terms of military capability, America is not retreating. It is redefining leadership. The EETS prove that, in modern conflict, the effectiveness of a fast and reliable supply chain can be as strategically relevant as an artillery barrage or an air offensive. These heavy transport units not only facilitate moving tanks and combat vehicles, but redefine the very meaning of firepower by turning deployment speed into a weapon in its own right. Still, it's impossible not to ask about the durability of this massive U.S. support. Maintaining 100 or more heavy haulers in constant motion with their maintenance, fuel, and security amounts to an investment far beyond a simple equipment delivery. It implies long-term logistical, diplomatic, and budgetary commitments. How long can Washington sustain this pressure on Ukrainian routes before internal tensions or congressional debates arise over the political and economic cost of such a show of force? At the same time, the question remains of how Moscow will respond. It's likely that Russia's answer will soon manifest in new interdiction tactics, from using drones to track these mobile convoys, to setting up improvised anti-tank systems on secondary roads, or even launching cyber attacks to disrupt the communications coordinating EETS movements. Will we then see a new cycle of countermeasures and countermeasures, with both sides locked in a continuous race to anticipate and neutralize each other's advantage? Finally, the role of European allies cannot be overlooked. If mobility consolidates as the key to tipping the balance, NATO countries will have to evaluate whether their own forces are ready to replicate this logistical model. Are European nations willing to invest in similar systems and coordinate their effort with Kyiv? Or will domestic politics and budget constraints limit their contribution to this new strategic paradigm? Ultimately, the mobility revolution, far from being just a one-off project, stands as a grand experiment, determining whether future wars will be won with deployment speed and operational flexibility, or if traditional firepower supremacy will prevail. As this logistical trial unfolds, all powers involved must rethink old doctrines and urgently adapt to a scenario where time and distance become decisive factors of military success. This is what wanted to share today. A thorough analysis of the logistical and strategic evolution that is transforming the war in Ukraine. And that concludes our report on how speed and strategic logistics are redefining the conflict in Ukraine. Now I ask you, do you believe this race against time with 100-ton trucks will finally tip the balance in Kyiv's favor? Or will we soon see a new Russian counterblow reversing this advantage? Is this bet on mobility the natural evolution of modern warfare, or a risk that could trigger a greater escalation? Leave your opinion below. Will it unleash a world war? We'll stay attentive to every move that changes the course of this war. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and defend your stance in the comments.